everyone, this is Stephanie O'Connell, and today I'm talking about the biggest money lessons I have learned as a solopreneur. What I would consider a solopreneur is somebody starting and growing a business by themselves, solo, and generally with their own money. Basically, being a solopreneur is me using that money that I've earned through my various business activities to grow my business rather than using a loan or venture capital or anything like that. And it's largely a one-woman show, at least when I started. Today, I want to share the biggest money lessons I have learned as a solopreneur. I have learned these lessons both through mistakes and through some wins and through a lot of trial and error. So the first big money lesson I learned as a solopreneur was that revenue is not the same as income. Okay, what does that mean? Well, revenue is the money your business makes, whereas your income is like the money you pay yourself. Now that might seem really obvious when you think about a bigger company. When you're just writing, let's say $20 blog posts, and that's like your initial revenue, you don't really think of yourself as a business owner. You don't think of that $20 as your business revenue. You really think of it as your income. That's what you earn. And that can get really dangerous because as your business continues to grow, you also have to pay a lot of expenses out of that. But one of the things that really helped me make that distinction between my revenue and my income was setting up a business bank account, setting up business checking, having a business credit card, having business specific checks. And that way I could pay myself a salary from my business account to my personal account. And it was very clear that what I was transferring from my business account to my personal account was not the same as what I was getting from my clients, helping really make that distinction between revenue and income for me much, much clearer to see. Now, as your business grows, if you can pay yourself a regular salary, one that helps you meet your financial needs and your financial goals, that's going to be great because it will give you a very clear metric for how much you need to pay yourself, and then anything left over is stuff you know that you can freely reinvest in your business. So it's really hard early on, and actually throughout your business, to know like how much can I afford to reinvest? Can I afford, in my case, can I afford to do a site redesign right now? Can I afford to bring on another contractor? Can I afford to take this class so I can up-level my skill set? Well, if you are paying yourself a consistent salary each week, and you have more than enough money from your revenue to afford those things, you can very clearly see that. So in that way, creating that real distinction between the business and the personal, between the revenue and the income, and if you're able to paying yourself a regular salary, you can create a lot more freedom and flexibility and clarity around your business finances in general. Another major money lesson learned as a solopreneur is just the importance of being your own HR department. That means setting up your own retirement accounts, taking care of your own insurance policies. So health insurance, potentially disability insurance, any benefit that's really essential to your well-being that you would get through a typical job like health insurance and retirement is something you must be proactive about. So just as you are both the accountant and the salesperson and the assistant and the creator when you're running a business, you have to be the HR department as well. And that means being proactive and taking some time to research your health plan options, taking some time to research your retirement plan options. There are options out there, but now it's on you to take care of those things. So it's really important that you dedicate some time to doing that, just as you dedicate time to doing anything else in your business. Money lesson number 3 as a solopreneur is cash flow is king. This is something I continue to struggle with. I have to deal with a lot of invoicing, a lot of chasing down unpaid invoices, a lot of following up on invoices, a lot of long payment terms. Even as the contracts get bigger, maybe even more so as the contracts get bigger, it's sometimes even more difficult because the difference between the day you get paid and the day before can be tens of thousands of dollars. And the fact is, for me, I still have recurring expenses. I still have to pay my contractors. I still have to pay those monthly bills for my social accounts, for hosting on my website, for any business plan subscription I have, whether the client pays on time or not. So having cash flow, making sure I have enough cash in my accounts to satisfy those needs, even when those invoices aren't coming in on time, is essential. One of the things I've done is I've started being much more conservative in my business reinvestments. So I have a tendency to spend a lot of my business revenue on my business. I would say about 50% of all business revenue goes back into the business. And early on, it was even bigger than that, right? Like I wasn't making as much, but I would really reinvest everything as much as I could, as long as I didn't need the money to pay my rent or eat, it would go back into the business. And I still largely feel that way. But what happened was that I would make these reinvestments, and then I would have some client stuff happen, but then the client stuff was late, or it wasn't happening on the schedule that I thought it was. So then all of a sudden my equation was really lopsided in where I was making all these investments, but then I hadn't been paid on time, and I found myself in debt. And I really didn't like that, and I felt a lot of shame about it, especially writing about personal finance. I'm talking about money all the time, and yet I was in this position where I just couldn't figure out how to deal with the finances of business ownership. And so what I did is I got really conservative in terms of that reinvestment. And what I would do is, instead of assuming I would make the money that I was supposed to make as contracted, I started making decisions about how to spend money on my business and how to reinvest in my business only with money in the bank. So it's very different to go from, I just signed this contract to be paid in 30 days, so I'm going to make decisions about how to spend that money and reinvest in my business based on that, versus, I just got this money in the bank and I'm going to make decisions based on that. Because I've been in that position way too many times where, in theory, tens of thousands of dollars are on their way. But, if they're not in my account when it comes time to pay the credit card bill, or it comes time to pay my contractors, or anything else, I'm the one holding the bag. And that was really a not pleasant position to be in, and I kept finding myself there more times than I cared for. And so now I've gotten very, very conservative about making sure I have the money in my account before I make decisions about spending it or reinvesting it on anything. The other thing I've done is try to find more consistent sources of revenue in addition to those bigger lump sum payments. I don't love freelance writing. I try to avoid it, but one of the reasons I do it every so often is because it's not as much money, but I know I'm going to get that money in a timely fashion. So that creates some cash flow and some consistency in a business that's otherwise very inconsistent and very up and down. And so I do that for the cash flow rather than necessarily just the revenue it brings in. So if you can create something where you're gonna have a consistent cash flow that helps you meet your essential expenses each month, then you'll have a little bit more consistency, a little bit more security, and a little bit more flexibility when those paydays don't necessarily come as expected. Another major money lesson learned as a solopreneur is that your business needs a buffer. Just like you need a personal buffer that is your emergency fund for stuff happens in your business too. And sometimes it is, those checks coming in later than you anticipated. Sometimes it's an unexpected expense that comes up. Sometimes it's an unexpected opportunity you want to seize, and you need the money to do it. So it really helps to build not just a cash flow base, but also a cash buffer, like an emergency fund for your business, or just a larger amount in checking than you might have for your personal expenses. I can't tell you how many times I thought, okay, well, instead of keeping $2,000 in my business account, I'm going to keep $5,000 in my business account. And then I'm like, I'm going to keep $10,000 in my business account. I mean, that's an enormous amount of money, right? I used to not have anywhere near that amount of money in my whole life, let alone just in my business account. And to me, it hurts to be like, okay, well, I'm gonna just let that money sit there because I want to invest it. I want to reinvest it, or I want to put it in my personal account, or I want to, put it into my investments. But I have now come to terms with the fact that I actually need to have at least that amount of money in my business account because of how often I have to deal with chasing down late payments from clients, and I often will need to pay 2 months worth of business expenses before I actually get money from a client. Because yeah, there's definitely an opportunity cost to just letting money sit around and checking. It's not really earning interest. It's not really like you can't invest it, you can't grow it. But, you know, cash flow is king, right? And sometimes you just need that extra buffer to be there for you so you're not having to constantly pull money out of savings. Hopefully one of these days I'll figure out what that right amount is. Finally, my last money lesson learned as a solopreneur is that your earning potential is truly unlimited. And this is true for anybody, but, you know, I've realized this mostly as a solopreneur. I remember at different points in my business journey that I felt like I was capped out. For example, when I was freelance writing, I was like, okay, well, someone will only pay so much for a 500-word article. And that's true, right? Somebody will only pay so much for a 500-word article. But that doesn't mean that I can't earn more. I can change my offering. I can change, you know, the format. It doesn't have to be a 500-word article. It can be a video. It can be a talk. It can be an event, right? So, and then as I pivot and I find new audiences and new offerings, I'm able to really scale my business and I'm able to scale my revenue and my earning in a way that I maybe didn't consider before. And I think kind of internalizing that and always considering what those pivots are, considering how you can get more for your money, considering how you can free up more of your time, considering how you can really scale your business and scale your growth and your revenue and your earnings. I think that is one of the most exciting things about solopreneurship. It's definitely one of the most challenging things about solopreneurship, but it keeps everything interesting. And it's definitely a money lesson that I've learned personally in my experience, but I think it's also really important that it's something you internalize as you're going about your own business journey, because it can easily feel like you've maxed out somewhere and you might feel stuck, or you might feel like you're still not earning enough. And in that case, I would really just challenge yourself to rethink the market, rethink your offering, who's your audience, you know, where is there opportunity that you might be able to get more? Because your earning and revenue potential really is unlimited. And if you start from that mindset, if you start from this idea that you can always earn more money, you start thinking differently. And one of the things that was really helpful for me was following other entrepreneurial journeys, especially people who were on a similar path to me. So, you know, there are people who are bloggers who make money in very different ways than I do, but I was still inspired by their journey because I could see them finding ways to scale their businesses. And I watched them go from making an extra $500 a month to making a full-time income to building a six-figure business to some people building $1 million business. And, you know, I'm not there yet, but I believe that's possible. And because I believe it's possible, I'm thinking about ways I can do it. And that is a very different approach to being like, well, I could never build $1 million business. Yeah, so if you have any questions about solopreneurship in general, the money aspect, not the money aspect, whatever aspect, let me know in the comments. I love talking about it. I love talking about business. So if you have a question, put it in the comments and I'll try to put it in another video. Thank you so much for watching. If you like the video, hit that thumbs up button, subscribe, share it, and I will catch you next time. Bye.